The stars hung heavy in the crisp winter sky above the small town of Pine Hollow, Massachusetts. The town, nestled between towering pine forests, seemed like it had been lifted straight out of a snow globe, its streets dusted with fresh snow that sparkled under the moonlight. It was Christmas Eve, and a calm, almost magical silence blanketed the town. Warm golden light spilled from the windows of cozy houses, holiday wreaths adorned doors, and faint carols drifted through the icy air. For most, it was a night of peace and celebration, a night to gather with family, exchange gifts, and revel in the comfort of loved ones. But beyond the warm homes and festive cheer, deeper into the snowy woods, an extraordinary story was about to unfold. It was the kind of story that would stay with you, one that would touch your heart and remind you of the profound connection we share with the animals in our lives. A story of love, loyalty, and the unshakable bond between a family and their dog. One that would forever change their lives and leave a powerful message about the healing and transformative power of animals. At the center of this story was Charlie, a scruffy, spirited golden retriever who had a knack for touching the hearts of everyone he met. Charlie wasn't just any dog. There was something uniquely special about him, a quiet wisdom that radiated from his soulful brown eyes. You could see it when he sat beside Grace Henderson, his adoptive owner, as if he could sense every worry and ache in her heart. And you could see it when he lay at the feet of Lily, Grace's bubbly 5-year-old daughter, letting her play with his fur as if he had all the time in the world. Charlie had joined the Henderson family 2 years earlier under unlikely circumstances. Grace, a single mother in her early 30s, had been driving home from work one rainy afternoon when she decided, on a whim, to stop by the local animal shelter. She hadn't been planning to adopt a dog. Her hands were already full juggling work, raising Lily, and trying to rebuild her life after a difficult divorce. But something about Charlie, huddled in the corner of the shelter, caught her eye. The shelter worker had explained that Charlie had been found wandering the streets, malnourished and scared. Most people overlooked him in favor of younger, more energetic dogs, but Grace couldn't walk away. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, as if he understood her pain. Maybe it was the quiet, unspoken sense of companionship he seemed to offer. Whatever it was, she brought him home that day, and from the moment he stepped through her door, it was clear Charlie was no ordinary dog. For Grace, Charlie became more than just a pet. He was a constant source of comfort and strength. When the weight of her divorce threatened to overwhelm her, Charlie would nuzzle his head into her lap, his warm presence soothing her like nothing else could. And for Lily, who had struggled to understand why her father was no longer in their lives, Charlie was a loyal playmate and a quiet protector. In many ways, Charlie healed their family in ways Grace hadn't even realized they needed. And it's not just Grace and Lily who've experienced the extraordinary emotional support a pet can bring. Research has shown that animals, especially dogs, can help alleviate stress, reduce loneliness, and even combat depression. For people of all ages, but particularly for seniors, the bond with a pet can transform their days, turning loneliness into companionship and sorrow into joy. In moments when life feels overwhelming, having a dog like Charlie by your side can provide a sense of connection and purpose that no pill or therapy can replicate. Charlie, it turned out, wasn't just a dog. He was a lifeline. The Hendersons lived in a modest cabin on the edge of the woods, surrounded by towering pines that swayed gently in the wind. Their life was simple but warm. On this particular Christmas Eve, the cabin was alive with quiet excitement. Lily had just finished decorating the tree, her small hands carefully placing homemade ornaments alongside shiny red baubles. Charlie watched from his usual spot by the fireplace, his tail wagging lazily as Lily tried to hang a gingerbread cookie just out of his reach. "Mama, look," Lily said with a laugh, holding up her handiwork. Grace smiled, her heart swelling with love as she watched her daughter's face light up. This was what she had always wanted for Lily, a home filled with warmth and laughter. By the time the tree was finished, the presents were wrapped, and the hot cocoa was steaming in mugs, it was nearly bedtime. Lily was fast asleep in her room, snuggled under a thick blanket with Charlie curled up at her feet. Grace kissed her forehead softly and whispered, "Merry Christmas, my love." Then, turning to Charlie, she added, "Keep an eye on her, okay, boy?" Charlie thumped his tail gently in response, his eyes full of understanding. Outside, the snow was falling harder, blanketing the world in a cold, white silence. But not far from the Henderson cabin, in the shadowy woods beyond, a young woman named Maria Morales was stumbling through the snow, clutching her infant son tightly against her chest. Maria's car had skidded off the icy highway an hour earlier, slamming into a snowbank. Dazed and disoriented, She had no choice but to leave the wreckage behind and trek through the storm, hoping against hope that the faint glow of a distant cabin would lead her to safety. The snow was relentless, and the cold bit at Maria's skin as she staggered forward. Little Mateo, swaddled in a thin blanket, whimpered weakly against her chest. Her breaths came in short gasps, her legs trembling with exhaustion. Just as her strength began to give out, she sank to her knees in the snow, whispering, "Please, someone help us." Back at the cabin, Charlie stirred. His ears perked up, and his nose twitched. Something was wrong. He hopped off Lily's bed and padded to the window, peering out into the swirling storm. The wind carried a faint, unfamiliar sound, a cry that tugged at his heart. Without hesitation, Charlie nudged open the back door with his nose and vanished into the icy night. That moment, when Charlie made the choice to leave the warmth and safety of the cabin, marked the beginning of a miracle that would change everything. As Charlie's story begins to unfold, it's impossible not to think about the way animals like him bring us a sense of security, love, and even healing. Whether it's soothing a child's tears, comforting someone after loss, or offering unconditional companionship to an older adult feeling isolated, dogs have an extraordinary ability to fill the gaps in our hearts. This is why so many studies emphasize the incredible emotional benefits of having a pet, particularly for seniors navigating loneliness or seeking purpose in their daily lives. The wind whipped fiercely through the trees as Charlie raced through the snow, his golden fur coated in frost. The icy cold bit at his paws, but he pressed on, his sharp instincts guiding him through the dense forest. Back at the cabin, everything was peaceful, the Christmas tree glowing softly, the fire crackling in the hearth, but Charlie could sense something beyond the walls of his home. It wasn't just a sound or a scent. It was something deeper, a call he couldn't ignore. Less than a mile from the Henderson cabin, Maria Morales was crumpled in the snow, her strength all but gone. The storm had intensified, and the distant cabin light that had once given her hope now flickered faintly through the trees, seeming impossibly far away. Mateo, her baby boy, had grown quiet in her arms, his tiny body trembling against her chest. Tears froze on Maria's cheeks as she murmured to herself, "Please, just a little further," but her legs gave out beneath her, and she sank to her knees in the snow. The icy cold seeped through her thin coat, and despair tightened its grip. She clutched Mateo closer, her lips trembling as she whispered, "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." Then, out of the swirling snow, a shadow appeared. Maria blinked, thinking her exhausted mind was playing tricks on her. But the shadow grew closer, its shape unmistakable. It was a dog, large, golden, and determined. Charlie approached Maria cautiously, his eyes scanning her pale face and the fragile bundle in her arms. His heart seemed to understand what his nose and ears already knew. They were in trouble. He barked sharply, circling her, his tail wagging as if to say, "Get up. I'll help you." Maria stared at him in disbelief, her frozen fingers brushing against his fur. You found us," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. Charlie barked again, nudging her arm with his nose. It was enough to jolt her back to life. Somehow, she summoned the strength to stand, Mateo cradled tightly in her arms, and began following Charlie through the snow. For some, this connection between animals and humans might seem extraordinary, even magical. But those who've experienced it know better. It's the kind of bond that transcends words. Dogs like Charlie have an almost uncanny ability to sense what we need, whether it's protection, comfort, or even, as in this case, a lifeline. And it's not just in moments of crisis. Studies have shown that dogs can sense emotional distress and respond in ways that soothe and heal. For seniors, especially those navigating the challenges of aging or facing loneliness, these connections with animals can be life-changing. A dog's companionship has been shown to reduce feelings of isolation, lower blood pressure, and even help with symptoms of depression. Maria didn't know it at the time, but this golden retriever was about to give her not only hope, but also a chance at life. The journey to the cabin was grueling, every step through the deep snow feeling like a marathon. Maria's breaths came in shallow gasps, her vision blurring as exhaustion threatened to overtake her again. But Charlie never let her stop for long. Each time she faltered, he turned back, barking and nudging her forward. Somehow, his presence gave her strength, a reassurance that she wasn't alone in the frozen darkness. When the glow of the cabin finally appeared through the trees, Maria let out a sob of relief. Charlie barked loudly, announcing their arrival as he bounded toward the door. Inside, Grace had just finished folding a blanket when the sound of frantic barking made her freeze. Her heart raced as she rushed to the door, throwing it open to see Charlie standing in the snow, his fur coated in ice and his eyes filled with urgency. At his side, Maria staggered forward, clutching Matteo. "Please," she gasped, her voice breaking. "Help us." Grace sprang into action, helping Maria inside and gently taking Matteo from her arms. The baby was frighteningly pale, his lips tinged blue, and his small chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. "Oh my God," Grace whispered, wrapping him in a warm blanket and holding him close to the fire. Maria collapsed onto the rug, her body trembling uncontrollably. We crashed," she managed to say between gasps. "I tried to walk, but the cold. I didn't think we'd make it." Grace's heart ached as she glanced at Charlie, who had followed them inside and now stood by Maria, licking her hand as if to comfort her. "You wouldn't have made it," Grace said softly, tears welling in her eyes. "Not without him." Maria turned to Charlie, her frozen fingers brushing against his fur. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Thank you." The words felt too small for what he had done. The night passed in a haze of urgency and hope. Grace worked tirelessly to warm Matteo, wrapping him in layers of blankets and feeding him drops of warm milk. Maria drifted in and out of consciousness, her body weak from the cold, but each time she stirred, Charlie was there, lying beside her, his warm body pressed against hers like a living heater. Lily woke up once, rubbing her sleepy eyes and wandering into the living room. "Mama," she murmured, her voice groggy. "Why is Charlie so loud?" Grace knelt beside her, pulling her into a hug. "It's okay, sweetie. Charlie brought us some new friends who needed help." Lily peered over Grace's shoulder at Maria and Matteo, her eyes wide with curiosity and concern. "Is the baby okay?" Grace smiled faintly, though her eyes were still wet with tears. "He will be, thanks to Charlie." Lily tiptoed over to Charlie, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "You're a good boy, Charlie," she whispered, her voice full of love. Charlie licked her cheek, his tail wagging faintly. By dawn, the storm had begun to ease, and the first light of day cast a soft glow over the cabin. Matteo's breathing had steadied, and color was slowly returning to his cheeks. Grace let out a deep sigh of relief, though worry still lingered in her heart. They had survived the night, but the roads were still impassable, and they were hours away from medical help. It was in moments like these that Grace thought of how much animals like Charlie gave, often without recognition or expectation. Whether it's their ability to sense danger, provide comfort, or even just be present in our darkest moments, dogs have a way of anchoring us, grounding us, and reminding us of life's simple yet profound joys. For Maria, for Matteo, and even for Grace and Lily, Charlie had already done more than anyone could have asked. As the sun rose higher, warming the frozen landscape outside, Grace whispered to Charlie, "You saved them, boy. You really are our miracle." The first rays of dawn pierced through the frosted windows of the cabin, painting the walls with golden light. The storm had eased, but outside, the snow lay thick and unforgiving, blanketing the world in a quiet, frozen stillness. Inside, Grace sat on the floor, cradling baby Matteo in her arms. His color had improved, but his breathing was still shallow, each faint rise and fall of his chest pulling at her heart. Maria, huddled under a pile of blankets on the couch, watched with heavy eyes, her face pale and streaked with dried tears. "His breathing isn't getting better," Grace said, her voice trembling. She glanced at Maria, her own fear mirrored in the young mother's exhausted expression. "He needs a doctor soon." Maria swallowed hard, clutching the edge of the blanket. "But the roads." Before she could finish, Charlie let out a loud, sharp bark, startling both women. He stood by the door, his body tense, his eyes full of purpose. He barked again, pawing at the door as if to say, "I know what to do." Grace looked at him, her heart pounding. "Charlie, you want to go?" she asked softly. Charlie barked once more, louder this time, his tail wagging slightly despite the tension in the air. There was no hesitation in his gaze, no doubt in his posture. He was ready to act. Maria stared at him in disbelief. "You're going to let him go? What if he gets lost? What if—" "He won't," Grace interrupted gently, kneeling down to stroke Charlie's fur. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she clipped on his collar. "He knows what he's doing. I don't know how, but I trust him." Maria hesitated, then nodded, her eyes filling with silent gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to Grace, to Charlie, or to both. Grace opened the door, and the freezing air rushed into the cabin. Charlie bounded out without a second of hesitation, his golden fur shining in the pale light of dawn. He paused at the edge of the clearing, turning back to meet Grace's gaze one last time, as if to say, "I'll be back." Then he was gone, disappearing into the forest. The hours that followed were excruciating. Grace paced the cabin, keeping Mateo close to the fire and checking his breathing every few minutes. Maria sat quietly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her lips moving in a silent prayer. Even Lily, normally so full of energy, sat still by the window, her small face pressed against the glass as she watched for any sign of Charlie. "I know he'll come back," Lily said softly, her voice carrying a quiet certainty that brought tears to Grace's eyes. Charlie, meanwhile, was a blur of motion as he tore through the snow-covered forest. His paws sank deep into the icy drifts, and the cold air stung his nose, but he didn't falter. He followed his instincts, his senses tuned to the faint memory of the highway, the distant hum of engines, the smell of asphalt buried beneath the snow. Every fiber of his being was focused on one goal: getting help. When he reached the highway, it was eerily silent, the road buried under several inches of snow. For a moment, Charlie stood still, his ears swiveling as he listened for any sound. Then, in the distance, he heard it, the low rumble of an engine. His heart leapt. A red snowplow emerged from the haze, its headlights cutting through the early morning fog. Charlie bolted onto the road, barking frantically as he ran toward the vehicle. Inside the plow, Hank Lawson, a gruff but kind-hearted man who had been clearing the road since before dawn, spotted the dog and slammed on the brakes. "What in the world?" Hank muttered, stepping out of the cab and squinting at the golden retriever bounding toward him. Charlie barked again, circling Hank and tugging at his coat with his teeth. Hank frowned, his brow furrowing. "You tryin' to tell me something, boy?" Charlie barked sharply and began running back toward the forest, stopping every few steps to look over his shoulder. Hank hesitated for only a moment before nodding. All right, show me." The trek back to the cabin was slow and grueling, but Charlie never wavered, pausing every so often to make sure Hank was still behind him. When they reached the clearing, the sight of the snowplow breaking through the trees was enough to make Grace's knees buckle with relief. She rushed to the door, waving her arms as tears streamed down her face. "Over here," she called out, her voice cracking. Hank quickened his pace, his eyes widening as he stepped inside and saw Maria and Mateo. "Good Lord," he muttered, pulling out his radio. "I'll call for an ambulance. They'll send someone right away." Maria's sobs filled the cabin as Hank relayed their location to the dispatcher. Grace knelt beside Charlie, wrapping her arms around him as he panted heavily, his body trembling from the cold. "You did it, boy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved them." In moments like this, it's impossible to ignore the profound connection that exists between humans and animals. Charlie wasn't just a pet. He was a protector, a lifeline, and, in this moment, a hero. His actions weren't guided by logic or training. They were guided by love, the kind of unconditional love that only animals seem to understand. It's no wonder that so many people turn to animals, especially dogs, for emotional and even physical support. For older adults, the presence of a dog can be transformative, providing companionship, reducing anxiety, and offering a sense of purpose. Dogs like Charlie remind us that we're never truly alone, even in our darkest hours. When the ambulance finally arrived, the paramedics worked quickly to stabilize Mateo and check on Maria. Both were rushed to the hospital, but not before Maria turned to Charlie, her eyes brimming with tears. "Thank you," she whispered, stroking his fur. "You saved my baby. You saved me." As the ambulance disappeared down the snowy road, Lily threw her arms around Charlie's neck, burying her face in his fur. "You're the best dog in the whole world," she said, her voice full of wonder. Grace smiled through her tears, her hand resting on Charlie's head. "You really are, boy," she said softly. "You really are." The snow had stopped falling completely by the time the ambulance disappeared down the road, carrying Maria and baby Mateo to the hospital. A calm silence settled over the Henderson cabin, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall. Grace sat on the couch with Lily in her lap, her arms wrapped tightly around her daughter as she watched Charlie, now curled up by the hearth. His eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but there was a quiet pride in his expression. "He's going to sleep for a week after this," Grace said softly, stroking Lily's hair as they both stared at the dog who had changed everything in a single night. Lily nodded, her small hand resting on Charlie's back. "Charlie's magic," she said with absolute conviction. He knew they needed help. And in many ways, Lily was right. Charlie had done what no one else could have, sensed the danger, braved the storm, and brought help when it was needed most. It wasn't the first time Charlie had shown his intuition and loyalty, but this time, it had been life-saving. Grace leaned her head back against the couch, her mind racing with everything that had unfolded. Later that afternoon, Grace got the call she had been waiting for. It was the hospital. Maria's voice, though tired, carried relief and gratitude. "They said Mateo's going to be okay," Maria said, her words breaking into soft sobs. "They said he was so close, Grace. If we had been out there any longer..." Maria didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Grace's throat tightened as she gripped the phone, her free hand resting on Charlie's head. "Charlie saved you," she said simply, her voice trembling with emotion. "He did," Maria whispered. "I owe him everything. I owe you everything." But Grace shook her head, even though Maria couldn't see her. "You don't owe us anything," she said softly. "It's what family does." In the days that followed, Maria and Mateo were discharged from a hospital, and Grace insisted they stay at the cabin until Maria was back on her feet. The two families merged seamlessly, sharing meals, laughter, and an unspoken bond forged in the crucible of that snowy Christmas Eve. Charlie seemed to know his work wasn't done. He stayed close to Mateo, his protective instincts kicking in as he lay beside the baby's crib every night, standing watch like a guardian angel. It wasn't long before word of Charlie's bravery spread through Pine Hollow. Neighbors began stopping by the Henderson cabin, bringing casseroles, blankets, and gifts for Maria and Mateo. And, of course, they all wanted to meet Charlie. Children would kneel beside him, running their hands through his golden fur as their parents told him what a good boy he was. Charlie took it all in stride, his tail wagging faintly, as if he knew he'd done something special. One snowy afternoon, a knock at the door startled Grace. When she opened it, she found the sheriff standing on her porch, a small blue box in his hands and a broad smile on his face. "Afternoon, Grace," he said, stepping inside and dusting snow off his boots. "We heard about what your boy Charlie did. The town council had a little meeting, and we all agreed he deserves a proper thank you." Grace tilted her head, confused. "A thank you?" The sheriff opened the box to reveal a shiny silver medal, engraved with the words for bravery and loyalty beyond measure. He knelt down and placed it around Charlie's neck, giving him a hearty pat on the head. "You're a real hero, boy," the sheriff said warmly. Grace wiped at her eyes as Lily clapped her hands in excitement. "He's the best dog ever," Lily exclaimed, wrapping her arms around Charlie's neck. And it was true. Charlie wasn't just a pet or even just a hero. He was a lifeline, a reminder of how deeply animals can impact our lives in ways we sometimes don't even realize. It wasn't just about the night he had saved Maria and Mateo, it was about everything else too. The quiet comfort he gave Grace when her heart was heavy, the way he made Lily feel safe and loved, the connection he created that went beyond words. It's moments like these that remind us why animals are so much more than companions. For seniors, in particular, the presence of a dog like Charlie can mean everything. It's not just about having someone to share the quiet moments with. It's about the deeper emotional connection that comes with having an animal who senses your needs, comforts you in difficult times, and brings joy to your everyday life. For older adults, studies have shown that having a pet can reduce feelings of loneliness, improve mental health, and even extend life expectancy. Dogs like Charlie don't just make life better, they make it fuller, richer, and more meaningful. And isn't that what we're all searching for? As winter gave way to spring, Maria found a job at the local diner, where the owner, moved by her story, offered her a position. Mateo grew stronger every day, his laughter filling the cabin like music. And Charlie remained the heart of it all, his bond with his family deeper than ever. On the anniversary of that fateful Christmas Eve, Grace found herself sitting by the window, watching Lily and Mateo chase Charlie through the snow in the yard. Their laughter echoed through the frosty air, and Charlie bounded through the drifts like a puppy, his golden fur gleaming in the sunlight. Maria joined her at the window, a steaming mug of tea in her hands. "Do you think it was fate?" she asked quietly. "That Charlie found us that night?" Grace smiled, her eyes misty as she looked at the golden retriever. Maybe, she said. Or maybe it's just what dogs do. They love us, no matter what. They give everything they have for us. Maria nodded, her gaze softening. I used to think I didn't need anyone, she said. But Charlie, he changed everything. He showed me what love looks like. Grace placed a hand on Maria's shoulder, squeezing gently. He's good at that, she said with a chuckle. It's why people like us keep them around. They take care of us, even when we don't realize we need it. And for anyone who's ever experienced the bond between themselves and an animal, you know exactly what Grace means. Animals don't just change your life, they transform it. That's especially true as we grow older. If you've ever wondered how a dog like Charlie could enrich your life, or the life of a loved one in their golden years, you'll want to discover the simple ways animals can improve mental health, bring joy, and even help with aging. Christmas morning arrived in Pine Hollow with a breathtaking calm. The sun rose slowly over the snow-covered trees, casting a golden glow across the frozen landscape. Inside the Henderson cabin, the warmth of the fire danced across the walls, mingling with the laughter of children and the gentle thump of Charlie's tail. Lily and Mateo were curled up on the rug, giggling as they tied a bright red ribbon around Charlie's neck, crowning him the best Christmas dog ever. Grace stood by the window, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee as she watched the scene unfold. Her heart swelled with gratitude, not just for the safety of Maria and Mateo or the blessings of the holiday, but for Charlie, the dog who had not only saved lives but had also reminded her of what it meant to be truly connected to the one she loved. Maria joined her, holding a cup of tea and gazing at the children playing. It feels like a dream, she said softly. I don't think I'll ever be able to repay you, or Charlie, for what you did for us. Grace shook her head, a gentle smile tugging at her lips. You don't need to repay us. Charlie didn't save you because he wanted anything in return. He did it because it's who he is. It's what animals like him do. They love us, without question, without limits. Maria nodded, her eyes misting over as she glanced at Charlie, who was now lying contentedly on the rug, his metal glinting in the sunlight. He didn't just save us that night, she said quietly. He saved me in so many other ways, too. He gave me hope again. He reminded me that there's still love and kindness in the world. Grace placed a hand on Maria's shoulder, her smile deepening. That's what dogs do, she said. They give us exactly what we need, even when we don't realize it. And Charlie, as if understanding their conversation, let out a soft sigh, his eyes closing as he basked in the warmth of the home he had helped save. For Grace, for Maria, and for the whole town of Pine Hollow, Charlie's story wasn't just about a heroic night in a snowstorm. It was about the incredible, unshakable bond between humans and animals. It was about love, loyalty, and the quiet ways that pets change our lives for the better, even when we're not paying attention. Charlie's story is a powerful reminder of the incredible role animals play in our lives. And for older adults, the companionship of a dog can be life-changing. Whether it's easing loneliness, boosting mental health, or bringing daily joy, the bond with a pet has the power to transform everything. If you or someone you love could benefit from this kind of connection, you don't have to wait for a miracle. My new ebook, How Animals Transform Human Mental Health in the Third Age, dives deep into the ways pets like Charlie can improve mental well-being, bring purpose, and enhance life during the golden years. This guide is packed with real-life stories, expert insights, and practical tips to help you understand how animals can provide not just companionship, but healing and hope. It's perfect for anyone who wants to embrace the love and support that animals offer, or share that gift with someone they care about. Click below to learn more and get your copy today. Because sometimes, a dog's love isn't just heartwarming, it's life-changing.